What happened on that night? Before we begin, I want to make it clear that this story is just a recounting and has no connection to religion. The aim of the channel is entertainment, and we don't want to offend anyone. If you're Catholic, there may be some elements in the story that you might find sensitive. This account took place in Cuernavaca, the city where Pablo was born and raised. It was there that he met his future wife, while they both rented a place to live and saved up to buy their own home. After many years, they finally achieved this dream. They moved into a somewhat old-fashioned neighborhood, but it had a special feature that enchanted Pablo. It was filled with majestic trees that brought life to the place during the day and, he couldn't deny, cast a mysterious and even slightly sinister aura at night, something he truly appreciated. The neighborhood was so old that it still had those public light poles with an orange hue and weak luminosity, which frequently flickered. For them, this was perfect, as the couple loved the horror and mystery genre. Although they were raised Catholic as children, they had left the church in their teens, first out of rebellion and then, in adulthood, out of conviction. When they started moving there, they never imagined that anything could go wrong. In fact, they had high expectations. They maintained a positive mindset and felt accomplished for finally owning their own home. Plus, the location was convenient, being close to their workplaces. However, one day, everything changed abruptly and unexpectedly. It was a Friday, and night was about to fall. Rain had been falling for most of the day. For many people, Friday meant partying, fun, and drinking. But for Pablo, it was the end of the work week, the start of a rest period, and a chance to start the next week with renewed energy. He walked home with an umbrella under a sky full of black clouds, light rain, strong winds, and thunder announcing an imminent storm. He walked several blocks until he finally reached home, where his wife greeted him with a kiss, albeit less effusive this time since he was soaked. His only wish was to take off his wet clothes, take a hot shower, and then have dinner. The night seemed perfect, weekend ahead, horror movies with his wife, while the sound of thunder and rain served as background noise. Even their cat seemed to have calmed down with the sounds of rain and ended up falling asleep. After dinner, they decided to go up to the balcony and watch the rain while smoking a cigarette. At that moment, it seemed like a great idea to watch movies in this setting. The storm was at its peak, shaking trees from side to side. Lightning lit up the sky. One bolt was so bright it managed to illuminate part of the street. About 2 seconds later, a deafening thunderclap caused by lightning was so strong it made the house windows shake. It seemed like it had hit all houses around them, and in an instant everything went dark because electricity had been cut off. The rain intensified so much that they could barely see houses on the other side of the street. The curtain of water became so dense it seemed like there was nothing beyond it. Suddenly a sound alerted them. The front door opened and closed quickly as if something had entered. Both turned around nervously, and his wife suggested they check what was going on. They grabbed their phones and turned on flashlights to explore what had happened. What they found wiped any trace of nervous smile off their faces. Under the faint light from their phones, they saw mud stains and small puddles of water extending from the door to the room next to theirs. Their first hypothesis was that the cats had done something, but something in the atmosphere that night made their instincts alert. Deep down, they knew the explanation couldn't be that simple. Their cats couldn't open the door. They could only accept the disturbing idea that there was someone else in their house, with unknown, perhaps even malicious intentions. However, they had been on the upper balcony of the house all along, and any intruder would have to pass right in front of them. They tried to calm their nerves, gathering courage to investigate the suspicious room. Although the room in question was mainly used for storing clothes, otherwise it was just a guest room. They searched every corner, illuminating everything in sight, but found nothing more than the mud stains that approached the door and then disappeared. They wanted to get rid of the unease, push away the scary thoughts that hung over them. They started cleaning up what was dirty and went back to the balcony in an attempt to calm their spirits. The darkness outside seemed less threatening than the darkness spreading inside the house. While smoking, they tried to find a logical explanation for the situation. In the end, they decided it was probably the cats. However, this explanation was more to calm each other down, as neither of them was truly convinced of it. They tried to pretend they weren't scared, as if this behavior could actually dissipate the fear they felt. They went to bed hoping to forget about the idea that someone might have entered their house. However, something woke them up, a sound that came from below. It sounded like someone calling their cats. Pablo initially assumed it was his wife, so he just turned over to go back to sleep. But then he felt her presence by his side, sleeping deeply. A feeling of emptiness took over his stomach, his mouth went dry and he was momentarily paralyzed as he still heard the call, but now accompanied by a muffled laugh as if someone was trying to contain laughter. Finally, he managed to move and shook his wife in hopes of waking her up, but she didn't move. Despite no longer being religious, the only thing he could think of was grabbing a rosary and a crucifix he had stored in a box in the next room. He didn't intend to use them, but a friend had given him these objects when she found out they were moving, claiming they were blessed and would be for protection. However, he was so scared he couldn't move. After thinking for a few minutes and with silence returning, he finally gathered courage to get up and fetch the crucifix. He grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight. That's when he noticed his cats were staring fixedly at the stairs. One of them started growling and he hugged it while going to fetch the crucifix, at least not to feel so alone. He opened the box and grabbed the crucifix while in his mind prayers he had learned as a child in catechism began to emerge. As he left the room, the cat growled frantically and jumped out of his arms, joining other cats who ran under the bed. Instinctively he looked toward stairs and saw something he dared not illuminate in darkness. It was a terrifying and bizarre sight that still haunts him today with an indescribable fear. A figure was quickly climbing upstairs, completely naked and covered in blood, with a crown of thorns on its head. He stood paralyzed, feeling on verge of fainting. It was as if it were a man, but at the same time it seemed like a figure that came alive. It was as if it were an image. He thought he recognized figure which stopped few meters from him in darkness, which his eyes were beginning to adapt to. Fear overcame him, preventing him from looking directly at the figure. He tilted his head to the left and then to the right before finally returning it to the center. "Are you praying for me?" the figure asked, letting out an almost inaudible laugh. It spoke slowly and continued, "Come, my son. Come closer. Do not be afraid, I am the Lamb of God," it said. "I am real. Put your hand on my side." What was before his eyes did not seem human, it was simply impossible. As it spoke, he saw the figure insert its hand into a wound on its side and twist. Then it put its left hand over its mouth, from which emerged a long, dark tongue, moving it up and down before letting out a laugh and saying, "You are praying, but I cannot help. I do not exist, but I do." Suddenly, the cats began to meow as if they were in agony. The figure in the darkness turned to face them and growled back. That was the last fragment of memory that Pablo remembers. His wife told him that when she heard the cats, she woke up. She tried to speak to him when she realized he was not in bed but got no response. She got up and tried to turn on the light, but the power was still out. She looked down the hallway and saw a light. It was his cell phone illuminating the floor. As she went out, she was startled to see him lying on the floor. She tried to wake him up, thinking he had fainted. She checked for any serious injuries and, relieved to find none, she was about to call an ambulance when a voice told her, "Let him sleep, he will be fine." She recognized the voice, but initially attributed it to still being sleepy, imagining things. But the voice continued, "He is fine, he just fainted." She felt like she was going into shock because she remembered what had happened a few hours earlier. Desperate, she started screaming and shaking her husband, trying to wake him up. The cat started making angry sounds inside the room. She looked in that direction and saw a figure rising from the bed as if it had been lying there. Then the figure sat on edge of bed, got up and took a step towards door as if about to leave. The wife was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to reach out for a phone that was nearby. She recognized that silhouette, which matched voice she had just heard. She said it was Pablo's mother, who had passed away 5 years ago. The figure in room with a strange movement held its jaw with one hand and forehead with other, as if chewing before saying, "Come, let him be, we will have fun, you and I," then let out a short, terrible laugh. The wife tried to pray, but shrill voice approached her, sat down on floor, crossing legs, resting elbows on knees, holding head in hands. It was so close she could see smile as it said, "Now we are together, let's pray for him, to the man of cross." The wife started crying, and there was something about those taunts that left her completely desperate. She closed her eyes tightly and screamed when she felt something launch at her, but it was Tomas, largest of cats, who started purring and growling. She still heard laughter coming from room, but refused to open her eyes and remained sitting next to husband, hugging Tomas. Minutes stretched like hours. With eyes closed, she fell asleep. Pablo woke up in the morning feeling weak, dizzy, and disoriented, as if he had slept for days. He saw his wife lying at his feet, still asleep, and Tomas beside her. He woke her up and she hugged him after a moment of confused looks. Both had no idea what they had experienced just a few hours earlier. The electricity had already returned, and the room light was on. They got up, and he asked what was going on and why she was crying. However, she explained that it was just foolishness, that she had gone to the bathroom and had laid him on the floor. She got scared, and seeing that he was not reacting, she panicked. He probably fainted, but there was no cause for concern. However, he doubted what she said at that moment as he began to vaguely remember, as if it were a blurred dream, of what had happened the night before. After hesitating for a moment, he shared his own experience, and then she also found courage to share what she had seen in the darkness. He went to another room to change and noticed something strange. He called his wife, who came running. He pointed to the sofa bed they had there. On it were 2 stone-carved images, figures that both recognized. They had seen these statuettes at an antique market the previous Sunday and knew they were the same because they almost bought them. They had a strange feeling seeing them that day, as if they were meant to have them. The seller said they were the only ones who had shown interest, that he had the statuettes for years and no one ever showed interest or asked about them, and he insisted they should take them. However, despite not being expensive in the end, they decided to buy a phone from the 30s. Perhaps the desire to have them was what attracted them to them. They decided to throw them as far away as possible. They stopped wondering how figures had gotten there and attributed to them what they had lived through the night before, something they wanted to believe was just a nightmare. Although deep down both knew they were not just nightmares, they wanted to believe that being far away nothing else bad would happen, but they were completely wrong. Just a few days later, figures returned. This time they noticed because Tomas was growling, looking outside behind plants. When they went to investigate what was making him so agitated, they realized figures had returned. Pablo almost screamed when he saw them. Both panicked, broke them, and threw them in garbage truck, but next day pieces were at door. They tried several times to get rid of them, but they always came back until they simply stopped throwing them away. Resigned, they tried to find another solution, seek help. First they contacted a santera, but she couldn't guide them. They tried to find seller from antique market, but he was no longer there. No one in area could give information about man. They asked for help from someone who claimed to practice black magic. They were so desperate it seemed like only solution, only thing that could help them, but it didn't work out. No matter how much money they could offer, he couldn't solve problem. They decided to leave house, put it up for rent, and moved into one that was temporarily loaned to them, believing this way they would get rid of those things, but it wasn't case. After weeks living there, and even though it was contradictory to what they believed, called a priest to bless house. He sprinkled holy water and said some prayers. As they had already been informed about what was happening, even though they were not practicing the Catholic faith, they chose to leave a blessed crucifix of considerable size, almost half a meter high, in the living room, along with a painting of the Virgin of Guadalupe. The arrangement of these sacred objects, however, could not deter the strange presence that had tormented them. Within hours, mocking laughter filled the environment once more. And that same night, a sharp pain woke one of them up. It was a sensation similar to a bite on the heel. At first, they thought one of the cats could be to blame, but upon regaining consciousness, a voice emerged from the foot of the bed. "My son, you must not fear. Do you wish to consume my body? Do you yearn to drink my blood?" These words left Pablo paralyzed. He couldn't articulate any words, and desperate, he squeezed his eyes shut, trying to think of anything, seeking to mentally escape the situation. However, a second voice joined the dialogue. "My little one, dear baby, here I am to protect you. Mommy will take care of you." As it spoke these words, the figure took Pablo's hand and led it to its face. His heart was beating frantically, almost on the verge of collapse, as he felt that skin which resembled raw meat but was warm. He asked for help from a man dressed in black. "Don't worry, running away won't free you from this intrusion," he assured them as he tried to separate them. Despite fear, Pablo tried to pray Our Father, but voice laughed mockingly, grabbed him and interrupted him with disdain. Communication broke down. He supposed his thoughts were being heard, that intruders knew his deep fear. Desperate, he tried to scream without opening his eyes, and after some agonizing seconds, a piercing scream escaped his throat. The wife woke up and asked, alarmed, what was happening. Still fearful, Pablo doubted if it really was her. For his relief, it really was his wife. She asked him if he was okay, to which he replied no, that intruders had returned, that they were there, and spoke to him. She questioned who they were, although she knew answer. With a tremor in his voice, he affirmed they were them, that both were in room with them. The time marked 23:57 when, with determination, she turned on light and affirmed there was no one else. It was then that Pablo finally dared to open his eyes and confirmed that indeed they were alone. He recounted recent terrifying experience, but still unable to reconcile sleep, they opted to turn on TV and stay awake all night. While having breakfast, they had crucial conversation about how to face situation. They could no longer ignore reality and finally made decision that would haunt them till today. They agreed they should try to establish direct communication with intruders. Fragments of their presence were always present, so they decided to speak directly with them. However, first efforts were fruitless. There was no response. They did not give up and continued for several nights, one after another, persevering in attempt at dialogue without obtaining any kind of response. On the 8th night, they once again asked the question, "Who are you? What do you want?" However, as usual, silence was the only response they received before going to bed. But then, from outside, from the other side of the door, someone called them. Finally, they had gotten a response. Two voices echoed in unison, pronouncing the following words, "It doesn't matter what you call us, but now you will know our desires." They cautiously approached the door and noticed something unusual in the room. It seemed that the voices were coming from the painting of the Virgin. Although they dared not look directly, they heard 3 impactful affirmations: "Know what we want." The first is that you know we are the dreams of this world. The second is that no God exists. There is no heaven, hell, or eternal life. And the third, humanity has its time counted. At that moment, they decided to turn on all the lights in the house, but strangely, despite the lighting, the house plunged into deep darkness as if light could not penetrate that place. Hugging each other, They were speechless as the affirmations they heard echoed in their minds and hearts. However, they never managed to understand why they were chosen for this disturbing experience. Prayers, holy water, and sacred images were ineffective in their struggle against this terrifying presence. Fear persisted. They then chose to spend more time in the garden outside the house as manifestations became more frequent, with whispering voices, enigmatic laughter, and sound of invisible footsteps. They did not venture to investigate nature of these beings or if they could protect themselves from them. At all times they felt they were being watched, although they believed that at least for now they would not dare to harm them. They stopped sharing their experience. People showed interest and then mocked them. However, their only intention was to warn others, prevent anyone who might face unknown, and prevent suffering. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share this video with those who like supernatural stories.